Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of Biz Talks. My name is Rick Gutierrez. I am your host and your business advocate. Hey, this is the place where business entrepreneurs, business professionals, business owners, they come here to share their knowledge in everything and anything that has to do with business. They're going to share some insights, tips, and tricks as to what has helped them along the way, and then they're going to be sharing some of their services and products as well so that we can get to know them a little bit more. So we're going to have an amazing show today, and I'm excited about it because the lineup of guests that we have today have a tremendous amount of years, decades of experience in business in their own field. So it is my honor and privilege to have Mr. Greg Schaefer back on the show. Welcome back, sir.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, it's always a great opportunity to have you back. We learned a lot every single time that you are here. You provide an extensive amount of knowledge with your services, your company, and just knowledge of business in itself, that you've had throughout the years. So it's always a great conversation. And I think this week is going to be no exception. We're going to have a great conversation sharing some additional details about your company, what you guys offer, and all that good stuff. Does that sound good to you?
Absolutely.
All right, wonderful. So one of those episodes when you were here, we kind of touched on this briefly, but I kind of want to go dive in a little bit more into this because I think our viewers could potentially learn a little bit more about your company, vCISO Services LLC, and the strategic information security expertise that you guys have, particularly in the small and the mid-sized businesses. Let's talk about, let's dive in a little bit more into what a virtual chief information security officer does and how your services differ from a traditional in-house person, whatever you want to call it, technical person that you have in-house. So typically it's a security officer that has, that's inside in their teams, in their own realm of business, but you guys provide something a little bit more. What do you guys do over there?
So a virtual CISO is going to be a part-time information security consultant who ideally has years of experience as a chief information security officer or similar. We talked about that before. But one of the issues is that the demand for qualified virtual CISOs is a lot higher than the supply. So sometimes someone who has extensive information security risk management experience makes a good virtual CISO as well, because that is what we do. It's about information security risk management. In that sense, it's the same as what a chief information security officer does. Now, there's also still that supply issue, but there are now coming out in the industry, I'm aware of at least one certification that helps to fill that pipeline, if you will, of virtual CISOs. This is a certified virtual CISO is what they call the certification. Kind of makes sense, I guess. And the idea is that it's an apprenticeship type program that helps to fill the need, because we're seeing so much more of that SMB, small and mid-sized businesses that need that specific experience, but they don't have and they won't have an in-house security officer. They just can't afford the expense. They need the experience. And the same thing with like security teams. You mentioned like what's the difference? So small and mid-sized businesses are going to have smaller security teams, if a security team at all. And even if they have a security team, a lot of times it's just part of information technology. And sometimes there can be a little bit of a conflict of interest between the two. You have a system administrator that's also monitoring the system, and you're missing a little bit of the checks and balances. But it's a different environment because of the size and because of some of the needs, the smaller business, that it is for a large business. And what other difference is that a virtual CISO is a consultant, and that's a skill set all its own. We're
Mhm.
not staff, and it's more challenging sometimes to establish those relationships that we need to establish. So I wanted to finish by emphasizing that sometimes even I mentioned that full-time virtual CISOs make a good virtual CISO sometimes, but not all of them can transition because of these differences.
Yeah, I think it's a very big difference in my personal opinion. There's a lot of businesses out there that have an internal team, but they're not secure, necessarily security based, right? They're
Mhm.
not. That's not their focus. That's not their forte. So, what would you say to a business owner right now that says we're good, we have an internal IT team that's taking care of all of those things? What would be your suggestion?
Well, I'd emphasize that IT security is not the same as information security. It's a subset. And that's why I don't like the term cybersecurity sometimes, because it implies that everything is just IT related. So my response would be, well, let's talk about kind of the broader part of the information security program. Do you actually have a strategy for information security? How does it match with your risk tolerance of the organization? And when you start having those conversations with small and mid-sized businesses, they begin to have that, I guess, like the light bulb coming on over the head. It's like, oh, I didn't realize this. I thought it was just all about having servers and having firewalls and all of that. And once you get that aha moment, then it becomes more of an integrated business issue, and then we can move forward from there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very big difference. So, my recommendation is to talk to an expert. You've got one here, you're listening to one here with Greg Schaefer. So, talk to an expert in information security because it is very different from IT security. So, Greg, one of the other questions that had come up was, what are some of the significant changes that you've seen in your industry? I mean, you've got well over decades, let's say, of experience in your industry. So, what are some of those significant, changes that business owners could potentially, are not paying close attention to?
Well, back in the day, the communications were more point to point. It wasn't distributed like you see on the internet today. But um, as time went on, and the Defense Department, I think it was in the United States, had created this networking technology to break up those communications into little pieces of information. And therefore, those little pieces of information can go on different paths, which is great in case the original communications line was cut. But what came with that was a greater exposure of an attack surface, if you will. So as time has gone on, we've seen more and more applications now that have leveraged this quote new technology back in the early and mid 90s. And then one early challenge for me, as far as in my professional career as a new technology, was the beginning of music sharing on the internet. And there was a program called Napster at the time. I was in charge of the network for a large university in Tennessee. And the students love to come to the university to, I mean, obviously to get an education, but they loved being housed on the university because there was high-speed internet access in the rooms there. Not what they were accustomed to at home. This was still during the time of dial-up networking. So what was happening here is that um, this when you build new technology, there's going to be like all sorts of ways to take advantage of it. Some of it good, some of it maybe has unintended consequences. And here they were sharing music files, and that created a big problem, not only from the music industry because of the copyright and loss of revenue, but also from the networking side because of the bandwidth just being saturated. So eventually what happened is that we figured out how to manage the bandwidth. The music industry figured out how to manage the copyright. That was all taken care of. And then as time went on, this has really been the cadence over the years as technology grows. There's nothing different. So you have technology evolves, applications evolve, misuse evolves, controls evolve, and then we start the dance all over again. And we adapt to those changes by understanding not only understanding what historically what has happened, but also understanding the new technologies that come out and the potential threats that they could pose.
Now, Greg, if I'm not mistaken, did I hear you say the word Napster from back in the day?
That's what I said. Were you a user?
I remember the software, I remember the program, but I was not tech savvy back then. I mean, this was new. Like, what was it? Like the early '90s, I think, or something like that.
I think Napster was about like 97, 98, 99,
Okay,
so a little bit
so
past that, but yeah.
late '90s. Lord knows that back then I did not have any technology whatsoever, so I did not have anything to do with it. But it's just kind of
I wasn't
that's
blaming you, don't worry.
no, no, no. Well, the thing is, what I'm trying to highlight here is that we have an expert in the information technology space that has been in business for many decades, and this is the expert that a lot of our viewers need, and that's the reason why you're here. That's the reason why we bring this value of your knowledge and experience, and the reason why I mentioned and went back is because just to kind of showcase that we're not just only talking about you being in your industry for many decades. You actually gave a prime example there because mid 90s, late 90s, that was a couple of decades ago. So
Yep.
That's
Yep.
the reason. That's the reason for highlighting that. You are an expert, and we appreciate you being here. We are going to take a quick commercial break, folks. Stick right there. We'll be right back with another episode with Greg Schaefer again.